Hi, my name is Dami Amoo, and this is my video essay dissertation titled The Representation of Female Sexuality in Cinema. There have been many studies about how women are being portrayed in movies. These studies are either based on their portrayal as weak damsels in distress or displayed as objects of lust and sexual desire for their male counterparts. While these tropes are true in classical Hollywood cinema, identified by Noel Birch in his concept of the institutional modes of representation, my study aims to do the exact opposite. This study aims to analyze how female characters who embrace their sexuality are being portrayed in cinema. My hypothesis is that there is a strong correlation between sexually empowered female characters and their portrayal as evil. In other words, the more sexually empowered a female character is in a movie, the higher her chances of being portrayed as depraved are. By personal observation, I've noticed that when there is a prominent female character in a movie, they often become the root of all conflict in that movie. However, when they are sexually positive characters, they are very often punished for it by either being killed off or becoming the villain of the story, or being portrayed as broken and lacking in certain areas of their lives, or my personal favorite, a combination of all three. The other aim for this project is to evaluate how female sexuality is being portrayed in media as a joke, an enigma, or the seemingly general acceptance for its lack of importance or non-existence out of the satisfaction of male pleasure. There seems to be a running joke about women's supposed inability to enjoy sex or to be satisfied by it. The reason why this joke has been running for this long is because of the media. In its various forms, women are being ridiculed or being described as an enigma every day on every media platform because of how seemingly impossible it is to please them sexually.
Settle down, guys. Please, can we just have your attention? Thank you. Obviously, you guys are upset about the new female orgasm law. What exactly is the problem?
I don't get it.
Simple. If you have an orgasm with a woman, then by law, you must give her an orgasm too.
Girls don't have orgasms. This is impossible.
In order to test out these hypotheses and challenge my observations, I will be analyzing a few movies in order to identify a pattern or lack thereof. I will be using these following concepts to create my analysis. 1. The monstrous feminine theory, and 2. The voyeuristic gaze. The first thing I need to do is to identify the difference between a sexually empowered, positive character and a sexually objectified character. The difference is power. Looking at the social factors of the scene in which a character is being sexual and the power dynamics of the people in that scene, whoever is in control has the power. If a woman is being sexual with a man and she is in total control of the situation, then she is sexually empowered. However, if a woman has little or no power, then she is sexually objectified. The power is often the power of enthusiastic consent, which means that the person is entering into a sexual situation willingly, enthusiastically, and for their own benefit. And if they no longer want to be in that situation, they can leave without any consequences. But of course, it's not as black and white as that. There are blurred lines between both forms of sexualization. With modern media and our 21st century understanding of hypersexualized sex, it is a sobering statistic to learn that 1 in every 10 women have been coerced into sex, the majority by an intimate partner. According to the 3rd National Survey of Sexual Attitudes and Lifestyle Survey, which questioned 15,000 people aged 16 to 74. In addition to that, there are still significant issues with language, how we talk about sex, and how the media portrays sex.
There's something I don't understand about a woman's G-spot. I can't quite put my finger on it.
I believe a woman should praise the man, the king, and the man should praise the queen. But, my way of praising is called, how was dinner? You like the house you living in? You like all them clothes you getting? I'm taking care of your family. I'm taking care of my family. Putting in the work.
So you're saying you don't go down?
Nah, never.
So now if she told you she don't do that, is that okay?
Nah, it's not okay because you know what I'm saying?
I'm confused. So
because you gotta understand, I'm the Don, I'm the king.
As well as the issues of young people consuming certain cis-produced pornography as part of their sexual education. which contributes to the objectifying behaviors and performance-based sex. Society professes to value positive sex and women's empowerment, but also perpetuates the same damaging and tired sex narrative that the female orgasm is a myth and sex is over the moment the man orgasms. According to Cambridge Dictionary, sex is listed as the activity of sexual intercourse. Sexual intercourse is defined by Merriam-Webster as heterosexual intercourse involving the penetration of the vagina by the penis. So essentially, the definition of sex is the definition of penetrative heterosexual sex. So what does that mean? That means that the focus of sex for many people is the penetration of the penis. However, focusing sex around penetration presents so many problems. Not only is it problematic for lesbians, but also for straight women's experiences.
Can you point on this diagram where the clitoris is?
Yeah?
The clitoris. Okay. Where on this diagram is the clitoris?
The clitoris. I reckon this. No, I reckon this. I reckon this, the little hole. It's the outside ring. This one, I'll say, girl.
That's the clitoris.
I reckon so.
Harvard professor Elizabeth Lloyd analyzed 33 studies in regards to human sexuality and found that 3 in 4 women do not experience regular vaginal orgasms. In other words, if you are part of the 3 out of 4 women who do not vaginally orgasm, your orgasm is already considered unorthodox, unusual, and different. The textbook definition of real sex excludes your orgasm. A strong correlation has been established between the clitoris and female pleasure and orgasm over several generations. Among them are researchers like Alfred Kinsey and Brian Faz. So essentially, it is not considered real sex to give pleasure to a woman's main sexual organ, the clitoris, but rather foreplay, which is considered something extra. By believing, whether consciously or subconsciously, that their orgasm is less important, women accept and reproduce subordinate sexual status. The reality of the situation is that women's pleasure and orgasm consistently become secondary, less important, less prevalent, and sometimes ignored altogether or even disrespected. Women internalize the belief that they don't deserve the same sexual experience as men. It's just not a physical possibility, although I'd like to argue that the possibilities of women's pleasure is limitless. Women actually have a huge varying capacity for orgasm, not being portrayed by the media. In media for women is a commercialized version of the typical male-centric idea of sex without emotional strings, or as the youths call it today, friends with benefits. Picture this, a young girl trying to find her place in the world and trying to understand her body. On this journey of self-realization, one of the things she's naturally curious about is sex and pleasure. Let's try and navigate how she would go about learning about these things. Chances are, the first experience she will learn about having sex is from her parents or sex education lessons at school. While learning about sex from a responsible source is great, both sources tend to lean towards scaring young ladies from having sex while promoting the importance of safe sex and consent, which is not inherently bad, but that is where the conversation ends. There are no discussions about pleasure, masturbation, relationships, or LGBTQ+ experiences. So she intentionally or unintentionally seeks clarity about sex from, ironically, the most unrealistic representation of it, pornography. According to the British Board of Films classification, children and teenagers are watching and stumbling across pornography from an early age, in some cases as young as 7 or 8. Dr. Howells, an associate specialist in sexual health, believes that the biggest change in teaching young people about sex education is access to digital devices. Pornography is only 1 or 2 clicks away, she said. For those as young as 10 or 11, it might be their first sexual experience. So let's talk about pornography. Not just to highlight its problematic nature of it, but also to discuss how it portrays women and shapes their perception of themselves. Various sex researchers have taken 3 different approaches to understanding the degree to which pornography is wrong. 1, by highlighting the harm or suffering caused by pornography. 2, by characterizing pornography as a violation of certain rights. And 3, denouncing pornography as sex by radical feminists. One of these researchers, Amanda Costing at Tilburg University, describes pornography as a mode of externalized sexism that provides a form of mediated domination and exploitation that bypasses the usual mechanisms of personal moral evaluation. Furthermore, she criticizes the horrific and heartbreaking forms of abuse and violence that women have suffered during pornographic productions or because of it. For example, the ominous story of former porn actress Linda Lovelace, who famously claims her performance as a porn actress in the 1972 movie Deep Throat was coerced as she was beaten and threatened by her then husband into participating.
In order to have any kind of sex satisfaction, he needs to degrade another human being or cause pain or see some kind of perversion in order to be aroused. The first situation that ever occurred with Mr. Trainer was where he threw me into a room with 5 people and told me that unless I took off my clothes and satisfied these people, that he would kill me. And he pulled a .45 out. And I became very brave. I said, "You're not going to do this. There's 5 men in here. They won't let you do this." And he started laughing hysterically. He says, "These men don't care." He says, "You're just another slut, another prostitute, or this, and they don't care if you're dead or alive."
She later became a born-again Christian and a spokeswoman for anti-pornography movement. Or in the case of Mia Khalifa, a former Lebanese-American porn star who, after only having a brief stint in the porn industry, became the #1 most searched porn star from 2015 to 2017 with over 1.5 million views. However, after Khalifa had been disowned by her family and received negative global attention for ISIS-related hijab pornographic movies, she decided to leave the industry. However, the company she was signed to, the Bang Bros, refused to take down any of her videos and did not pay her royalties. Since then, Khalifa has been very vocal about her dislike for the industry.
Obviously, a lot of time has passed and you've moved on, but do you think there is some sort of post-traumatic stress that is in you from this experience?
Yes, and I think it kicks in mostly when I go out in public, because the stares I get, I feel like people can see through my clothes, and it brings me deep shame. It makes me feel like I lost all right to my privacy, which I did, because I'm one Google search away.
And in 2020, she recounted the situation where Bang Bros chief Jordan Sibbs conned her into doing a sensual photo shoot while wearing a hijab and holding firearms with an unknown man posing as a photographer from Vogue magazine. The similarity between Bowman and Khalifa's cases, while decades apart, is that they both had no power and were both severely taken advantage of. Their refusing to take part in sexualizing themselves led to a world of consequences, so they were sexually objectified and not empowered. As much as I would love to think that these cases are rare and have no bearing in the grand scheme of things, they are not, and they do. The greatest challenge besides social stigma and abuse faced by women who work in the pornography business is gender and racial inequality. As you can imagine, women do not control the production and distribution methods of the business. The men tend to marginalize women's perspectives and priorities and to foster a competitive environment that pits female workers against one another. So yes, it's true that pornography can be viewed as a detrimental influence due to its ability to promote sexual norms, but it also possesses a unique power which lies in its ability to shape the way we think about sex, pleasure, and sexuality, further promoting equality in the sexual sphere. The porn industry is increasingly evolving to a place where production companies are prioritizing women's views, women's health, women's safety, women's mental health, women's jobs, and financial security, women's need for self-liberation, and women's power. This sort of pornography can be referred to as ethical pornography or feminist porn. Ethical porn can be defined as that which is made legally, respects the rights of the performers, has good working conditions, shows both fantasy and real-world sex, and celebrates sexual diversity. With the promotion of ethical porn, working in the industry can make women financially independent or increase their confidence, giving them new freedoms to do things that previous generations of women could have never been able to do. This is, of course, with the explicit emphasis on equal pay and enthusiastic consent, which helps to decrease the exploitation and objectification of women in the industry.
We were working for ourselves with our own businesses, and we were working sort of every hour we could, and we was stressed and we had no work-life balance. So I saw this as an opportunity to have like a side hustle to give us a bit more time together, and I suggested it to Jess, and
I said yes straight away.
Yeah.
So we've been in the industry for
4 years.
4 years, yeah.
All in around 35,000 a month. Every month just seems to increase.
So most of our porn is like relationship based.
We'll sit down and discuss like things that we want to do, any specific styles that we want to do. Best part is
being together,
having to have sex with you every single day, and literally loving life.
Like obviously the money and the financial, and the freedom that we get.
The only negative I could find, people's perception of us.
Yeah.
But even then, it's not a concern. It really isn't. Like if that's your perception of us, crack on, because we're going to continue to do us.
However, this kind of pornography is not only liberating for the women that are individually involved in the production, it also persuades its audience into viewing the women it depicts as full moral agents, rather than simply objectifying them. It allows viewers to see these performers with respect and not to sexualize them. In creating these associations with women as sexual beings and women as deserving of respect and sexual pleasure, pornography is able to play a role in establishing a new place for women within the sexual sphere. But the fight for quality female sexual representation does not stop at pornography. This is in fact just the beginning. Sexually explicit films that draw on the conventions usually associated with pornography have now become more mainstream. For example, the 1992 classic Basic Instinct, one of my favorite movies. 30 years after its release, the cult classic does not fail to intrigue new viewers who have a vague understanding of the sexual natures of movies back then. The movie sets the tone for what it is straight from the first scene, with sex, full frontal nudity, murder, and gallons of blood. It opens with two people having sex and enjoying it. The rest of the movie follows a trigger-happy detective played by Michael Douglas who tries to figure out who did it. Then there is Catherine Tremell, played by Sharon Stone, a stunning, enigmatic novelist with a talent for seduction and a history of relationships that end with, death. It opens up with two people having sex and, enjoying it. However, the blonde woman who is on top pulls out an ice pick and stabs the man repeatedly to death. Then we are introduced to Catherine Tremell, played by Sharon Stone, a stunning, enigmatic novelist with a talent for seduction and a history of relationships that end in death.
Did you kill Mr. Boz, Miss Tremell?
I'd have to be pretty stupid to write a book about killing and then kill somebody the way I described it in my book. I'd be announcing myself as the killer.
The death of the former rock star in the opening scene sends a trigger-happy detective, Nick, into the orbit of the victim's lover, Catherine, who immediately becomes the prime suspect in the murder. Catherine ignites Nick's suspicions and his passions, and he soon becomes involved in his most dangerous liaison yet. There is no doubt that this movie and cinema in general appeals to a voyeuristic gaze, as audiences sit in the dark, cloaked in anonymity, watching stories unfold that reveal intimate details of a character's lives. Films that contain large amounts of sex and violence, such as the 1960 movie Psycho, Silence of the Lambs, 1991, and of course Basic Instinct are guaranteed box office success. Reality shows like Jerry Springer, Maury, and America's Next Top Model reveal intimate details of participants' personal lives, like confessions of sexual abuse victims, incestuous relationships, addiction, and then profits from them with high viewership. In earlier times, when the concept of television was introduced, the gaze was merely a term used to express astonishment and amazement. However, now it is used to describe more perverse voyeuristic habits. Laura Mulvey described in 1975, when films began to tell complex stories, the gaze of the spectator became very much voyeuristic, particularly as the female body was placed on exhibitionistic display. Another movie that I think really emphasized the existence of voyeuristic gaze is the 1995 classic Showgirls. The movie, directed by Paul Verhoeven, the same person that directed Basic Instincts, was deemed a box office flop and did not have the same commercial success as Basic Instincts. According to BBC Culture, no one really knew how to take that film. Alongside the expected copious nudity, costuming that stretched tastelessness of Las Vegas to its limits, unhinged hyperkinetic sex scenes, and jarringly crass dialogue.
I've had dog food.
You have?
Mm-hmm. Long time ago. Doggy chow. Oh, I used to love doggy chow.
I used to love doggy chow too.
In no time at all, it became an instant camp classic, and it became celebrated as a gloriously unintentionally bad movie. In both movies, Verhoeven's recurring themes include sex, violence, and more problematically, sexual violence. They both featured rape scenes. However, in Showgirls, it is avenged and has consequences. In Basic Instinct, the rape scene between Nick and his ex-therapist Beth was quite disturbing because it wasn't even considered as rape. It was not even portrayed to audiences as problematic. Beth slammed the door and on her way out, and that was the end of that. There was no repercussions faced by Nick. In fact, Beth ended up dead for protecting the same man that raped her. Heartbreaking. In 2021, Sharon Stone, the star of Basic Instinct, released an autobiography titled The Beauty of Living Twice, which spoke out about the struggles she faced being on camera with a lot of male crew members. Often not even the caterer employed women when I first started working, she wrote. My makeup and hair were men. Can you imagine what it's like to be the only woman on set? To be the only naked woman with maybe one or two other women standing nearby, the costumer and the script girl, and now I'm the intimidating one. But no scene highlights the vulnerability that actresses face more than the infamous interrogation scene. Stone claimed that the scene was shot without her consent and she feels dirty watching it. In that scene, the iconic one, it's Catherine who is under interview. However, she ends up leading the interrogation herself, cigarette in hand, quizzing Nick about his sex life before crossing and uncrossing her leg, revealing that she isn't wearing any underwear. I had been told, we can't see anything. I just need you to remove your panties, and the white is reflecting the light, so we know you have panties on, she wrote in her autobiography. It was me and my part up there. I had decisions to make. I went to the projection booth, slapped Paul, the director, across the face, left, went to my car and called my lawyer. Eventually, she conceded and agreed for the scene to be kept in the movie. Michael Douglas, who was also asked to go full frontal naked in the film, declined, and of course, his wishes were respected. Power. The recurring theme in all these examples I've stated is the lack of it. Stone was intimidated, manipulated, and without power. However, Catherine Tremell was the exact opposite. A very strong woman who was comfortable and proud of her sexuality. Catherine had the unique power to bend people to her will. with her sex. She was a sexually empowered character who manipulated and played every other character in the movie, including her audience. Gifty Enright, a female empowerment coach, explains, the uniqueness of Catherine's character helped pave the way for other strong, sexually empowered, liberated women in cinema. In some ways, Catherine's character helped break the mold, allowing women to be unapologetically sexual, she said. However, I'm not sure society was ready for such character, as the acceptable narrative for a woman is that she must be virginal and nurturing. The representation of female sexuality, although novel, did not bode well with many viewers, including myself. This sort of portrayal of sexually empowered women tells people that they are not to be trusted, that they are liars, cheaters, or even violent murderers. This is part of the reason why there are higher rates of sexual and domestic violence, as well as a lack of respect for women who have sexual autonomy and empowerment. No matter how empowered Catherine may appear to be, the film only heightens the tired yet still wildly believed trope that sexually empowered women are delinquent and that women are manipulative and use their sexuality as a weapon. This brings me to the concept of the monstrous feminine, developed by Barbara Creed in 1993. She argues that when the feminine is constructed as monstrous, it is frequently done in conjunction with the mothering functions. In other words, in horror movies, when a woman is portrayed as a monster, it is most likely linked to her reproductive body. According to Creed, there are 7 possible faces for female monstrosity. 1. Archaic mother. 2. Monstrous womb. 3. Vampire. 4. Witch. 5. Possessed monster. 6. Deadly femme castratrice. And 7. The castrating mother. Applying the same framework to my research, I would say that when in film a woman is portrayed as a monster, it is most likely linked to how she presents herself sexually. In other words, her monstrosity comes from her sexuality. For example, Annalise Keating in popular series How to Get Away with Murder. The name alone suggests that the protagonist is a teacher on getting away with murder because she's an expert, a monster. She's also sexually diverse and empowered. Just like Catherine Chamel, her sexuality played a role in her manipulative tactics. Her power made her a monster. In most movies or TV shows, when the man is in power, when he's in control, they have titles of prestige and success. For example, The Avengers, Line of Duty, No Time to Die, Venom, Invincible, Braveheart, Gladiator, Rocky. But when a woman leads, the movies are usually named after some sadistic outcome of the movie, already painting the picture before seeing it that whatever happens in this movie, it was all her fault. For example, Gunpowder Milkshake, Black Widow, Till Death, Jolt, The Suicide Squad, Army of the Dead, Red Notice, Scandal. But of course, that is not enough to prove that women are characterized as evil, deviant, incomplete, or unnecessary. So using content analysis, I will evaluate the 5 highest grossing movies of all time in order to show a correlation or lack thereof. The rationale behind using these movies is that they have the highest viewership in the world. These are the movies with the highest form of audience engagement, commitment, and investment. So these movies will be the best exemplar to represent what people are interested in and the type of movies people see themselves in. The second reason I picked this list is to avoid any form of bias or prejudice, so it would not seem like I only picked movies that I knew proved my theory. So here we go. According to Business Insider, here are the 5 highest grossing movies of all time. 1. Avatar. 2. Avengers Endgame. 3. Titanic. 4. Star Wars Episode 7. The Force Awakens. 5. Avengers Infinity War. Do you notice the same pattern? If you've seen these movies, then you would recognize that they are all male-led. But I would then examine them one by one to see if the female main characters in these movies are portrayed as monstrous feminine by virtue of their sexuality or their reproductive body, or both. Like the Bechdel test that has become popular for its rules of measuring female representation in fiction, I have derived 4 rules to measure good representation of female sexuality in movies. Rule number 1. There is a female character that exudes sexuality but is sexually empowered, not objectified. Rule number 2. She's not portrayed as the villain of the story. Rule number 3. She's not killed off. Rule number 4. She's not lacking in certain areas of her life that is inconsequential to the movie or does not play into the plot of the movie at all. If a movie meets all 4 of these criteria, then it represents female sexuality in a manner that is good. However, if a movie fails to meet at least 3 out of 4 of these criteria, then it can be deduced that that movie portrays female sexuality in a bad light and proves my theory. Number 1 movie on the list is Avatar. There is a very strong and powerful but quite unusual sex scene in the movie. So rule number 1 met. When Jake drapes his body around the Na'vi bride Neytiri, the heroine, his neural tendrils fuse into hers. Critics and commentators have been dissecting the psychological dimension of this otherworldly sex scene and how it captures the idea of tantric sex. Okay, quick sexual history lesson. Tantric sex is a slow meditative form of sex where the end goal is not orgasm, but enjoying the sexual journey and sensations of the body. Neytiri ends up fighting alongside Jake and saves him from being killed, and then they eventually get married. This movie is phenomenal, and the way that sex was portrayed is amazing as more than just bodily pleasure. This movie cannot be faulted for its representation of female sexuality because it has one of the most genuine and beautiful representation. Equal. So rule 2, 3, and 4 are met in this movie, which means that it does not follow the pattern of sexuality-based monstrous feminine, so it actually disproves my theory. Second movie on the list is Avengers Endgame. The only character in this movie that emanates any form of sexuality is Black Widow. Her character is often sexualized, therefore she is sexually objectified. This fails rule number 1. In the middle of the movie, she's killed off, failing rule number 3. Her death is portrayed as a sacrifice for the success of the mission, but what it really was a chance to save Hawkeye because he had a family. This seems perfectly logical, to kill off the person with less family and with less people that will miss them. But what if her death was planned from the beginning? What if her entire life and story arc was set up for that one purpose of becoming a sacrificial lamb? You see, Black Widow has dealt with one recurring underlying issue in all the Avengers movies she's featured in, her inability to have children. She addresses her infertility issues in Avengers Age of Ultron when she talks about how it happened and how she refers to herself as a monster.
In the Red Room, where I was trained, where I was raised, they have a graduation ceremony. They sterilize you. It's efficient. One less thing to worry about. The one thing that might matter more than a mission. Makes everything easier. Even killing. You still think you're the only monster on the team?
A monster in a way that being sterile makes her less of a woman, severely lacking in an aspect in her life. Rule number 4 failed. This setup was created so that her sacrificial death in Endgame would be the big payoff in turn because this setup was created so that her sacrificial death in the Endgame would be the big payoff and in turn become the purpose of her life. In other words, she is less important to be kept alive because she does not have a family. Inconsequential, her death was. She did not even get a funeral. When Tony Stark died, not only did he get a noteworthy ceremony, but the entire franchise came to an end at his death. So this movie fails to meet 3 out of the 4 rules, which proves my theory about sexuality and an overall negative portrayal. It also proves Barbara Creed's monstrous feminine theory because of her reproductive body, or lack thereof. She is portrayed as a monster. Third movie on this list is Titanic. The movie starts out with Rose engaged to Hockley, the son of a rich and powerful steel mill owner. However, it's clear that she's only marrying him for the money Hockley would inherit when his father died. Hockley treats her like she's his property. He forces her to act as though they were married even though they were only engaged. Evidently, Rose is much more objectified than she's empowered. That is before she gets in a relationship with Jack, the exact opposite of her type. So for the most part, the movie passes rule 1 but also fails it in some aspects. Part of the reason why Rose was initially attracted to rich men was because of her mother. She trained her daughter to only look out for financial security in her relationships. It was clear that she cared more about money than her daughter's happiness. That means that Rose was lacking in maternal love, and because of the way Hockley treated her, she also had low self-esteem. In that way, the movie has failed rule number 4 as well. Fast forward to the end. Most people, including major critics, have argued that when the ship had sunk and Rose was trying to float to safety on what seemed like a door, there was adequate space on it for Jack to also make it out to safety. Movie enthusiasts have suggested a number of clever positions that Jake and Rose could have tried to fit on the raft together. If this was the case, Rose can be seen as the villain of the love story, leaving Jack to die when there could have been a solution. However, on the flip side of the argument, according to director James Cameron, the amount of space on the raft was never a concern, but rather its buoyancy. Regardless of what actually happened, Rose was portrayed as an evil character for letting Jack freeze and drown to death. So this fails rule number 2 as she ends up as the villain of the story. The 4th movie on the list, Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. This movie contains no sexuality or sex. However, there is an uncertain love romance between Rey and Finn. We cannot really address her as the love interest, as her story arc only develops to ensure that she fulfills her destiny as the main character's protagonist. However, in previous Star Wars movies, women are portrayed more like supporting characters, but Rey in this movie has unique heroic wonders that is rare and new to the franchise. So this movie neither proves nor disproves my theory. Last movie on the list is Avengers Infinity War. This is similar to Endgame. They are in the same franchise and is a sequel to Infinity War. This story tells us what happens before Thanos snaps and wipes away half of the humanity in Endgame. Gamora was a big part of this movie because not only do we find out that she's Thanos' adopted daughter after he killed her parents, he took her in and raised her, but she also happened to be Star-Lord's love interest. She does not do anything particularly sexual in this movie, but her relationship with Star-Lord was central to how the conflict with Thanos would unfold. Then of course, she gets killed by Thanos, who pushes her off a cliff in order to secure one of the Infinity Stones. Rule number 3 failed. Since Star-Lord's love for Gamora was the only reason why she fumbled their one opportunity to take the Infinity Gauntlet, this makes her the central root of the evil outcome of this movie. This fails rule number 2. Gamora also watched her parents get killed by Thanos and was raised by him, so inherently, she's broken and lacks in areas of parental love. This causes the movie to fail rule number 4, proving my theory. Out of 5 of the highest grossing movies in the world, 3 of them failed my test for positive female sexual representation. This suggests that in every 5 movies created, 3 of them paint female sexuality negatively. No wonder the conversations we have around sex are mostly negative. No wonder men still believe that the female orgasm is a myth. No wonder people believe that women who embrace their sexuality are inherently evil or broken. No wonder society values female sexual freedom only when it benefits the men. No wonder. The media messages that are being passed along to the younger generations are breeding hate for women who love sex. Women should not have to hide the fact that they love sex, and they should not be vilified for it either. We need to take control of our narrative and create more positive representations for ourselves. Where do I see the future of female sexuality representation in cinema? I foresee an evolution. I see a paradigm shift in the way that we talk about sex, not just in movies, but within ourselves, in the way we tell young girls about it, not just to warn them about it or to avoid it, but to be able to take control of it and to enjoy it, to make the most out of it because the experiences are valid and necessary. Eventually, when we women are empowered sexually, it will most definitely reflect in our movies, in our music, in our social media platforms, and in our porn. Thank you for watching my video essay. I hope you enjoyed it.